wonderful learning. They missed the beginning. Totally fine. Um, we had some great learning sessions and conversations, and it resulted in two partners that we are thrilled to be working with, both the Haven Project and Wily Network. They are truly the heroes in this process, and we are very honored to be working with them. Want to say a big thank you to okay, so Angelica, and is anyone else here from the Haven? I think it's just Angelica, right?
Just me.
Okay, awesome. And then from Wiley, we have Judy and we have Sophie. Am I missing anyone else? Okay, we just want to welcome all of you and really appreciate you being here. Um, we understand that's early in the program. Most of you received the funding in June, and you're just starting the program. But we are looking forward to kind of hearing how it got started, and anything you want to share with us would be wonderful. But for now, I am going to turn things over to my colleague, Rachel Rivkin, who is going to facilitate today's conversation. And she is designing the second round of the 1725 fund, which will be launching in January. So thank you again for being here. We are really excited to have this conversation.
Thanks, Heidi, and thanks everyone for joining. Just like Heidi said, we're really grateful for you all for coming here and looking forward to hearing some good updates. I know we sent out the interim reports from both of the partners. Hopefully you got a chance to review, but if not, that's no problem. This is going to be a pretty informal discussion, so I'll give each of the partners about 5 minutes to provide sort of a high-level overview, and then I'll ask some questions and we'll open it up for all of you to ask questions as well. So let's have the Wily Network go first. And Judy and Sophie, I turn it over to you two.
Thank you. So we are a little bit earlier in our process. We have renamed this a graduate stipend. And so the process for us began when students graduated in, sometime in May, June. And so it's a little tricky to find that balance because everybody has a different graduation date. And what we did was we already have a built-in system using, it used to be called bill.com, but now it's called Bill. And we had students sign up. They already were signed up for bill.com. So administratively, that was relatively seamless. But they also had to fill out a W-9. We wanted to make sure students really understood what this meant to be receiving this money, different from funding they had received from us in the past or support that they received from us in the past. There was going to be tax implications regarding this money. So everybody but two students very quickly filled out the forms, opted in, and we got started. And so for those students, they are approaching the 6-month mark now. We have sent out the survey today. And we have also told them, because they're adults and we feel like there should be some consequences, in order to receive, as we told them at the beginning, in order for them to receive their January stipend, they will need to fill out the survey. The two students that didn't fill out the survey, one left the country, and there's just no way for us to manage that. And so he is not participating. He's the only person not participating. The other person, they took a long time to fill out the forms. And so we had a lot of internal conversations with us. And I'm going to highlight this because I think this is sort of the most interesting piece of what we're doing, is what's the balance between being a teacher, a supporter, a learning kind of environment versus this person just graduated from college and they should be able to fill out the W-9. So for this one person, when they did fill out the form, which was in August, we actually did give them their back stipend. But we decided as an organization that that is actually not in their best interest. That people, and so going forward, if somebody doesn't fill out the form on time or in a timely fashion, they will not get they can still participate, but they're not going to get that back 2 months like we did before. And everybody here was in agreement about that was sort of like a fair consequence of not filling out a form. And we give them plenty of time to fill it out. I don't want to make it seem like we gave them a week or something like that. The other piece of information I wanted to share with you was just around what I'm hearing from students anecdotally, and we'll have more information when we get the survey. The students who are sort of just setting out on their own and are managing things, are doing okay. For them, getting this money was like when their money was running out, to just have this come in so they knew they could buy their groceries, or they knew they could put it in their savings for the next month's emergency, or they, needed something new for, an outfit for, that was one thing I heard, was that somebody felt like they didn't have a suit jacket for work and they feel like they needed one. That it was such a bonus and such a stress relief, right? That it just took this additional burden off of them. It wasn't replacing their salary or their whole food budget for the month, but it was just such a relief to know that that was coming, and that it was coming from us. That was the other thing this one person said to me. The fact that it was coming from us, because then they knew it was going to come. That was also something, that there was a trust in that. No, that might have been more than 5 minutes. I apologize. So thank you all. Actually, I should have started there. Thank you all. This has been a really wonderful addition to getting students, sort of launching them off into their next chapter.
Nope, thank you. That was absolutely perfect. And it's, again, this is an informal conversation, so no problem to go over a little bit. I do just want to call attention to the chat in case anyone's on their phone and it's hard to see. Bill just asked about the basics. And so just a reminder that the participants are receiving $150 a month for 18 months. And with that, I will hand it over to Angelica.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. So for us, it's very similar to what Judy was saying. A lot of our young adults have been receiving $150. We actually started on August. So just this week, they started receiving their fifth check. For us, it's a little bit different in the sense that the population that we work with is individuals who are actively in crisis. So for those of you who are not aware, we work specifically with young adults who are housing unstable. So their needs and their use of the money, it's way more different. So a lot of what we've seen that they've reported to us on our survey is saying that it has helped them with, it has been phone bills, transportation to get to and from work, being able to pay maybe for some form of textbooks that they needed for school and things like that. Something that we noticed when we were doing the surveys as well, we were collecting this information, was that not a lot of them were utilizing it for food, but that's because they've had higher engagement with case managers and they've been able to sign up for food stamps. So that's another big piece for us regarding this model and this pilot program, is that we've made it so that the payments, they actually have to come in person into a space. So we're not using an online processing system. We do actual checks and they have to come pick them up in our space. So in our space, which we call our client service center, we actually have a limited food pantry. We have hygiene supplies. We have anything that might meet their basic needs. And because they have to come up and show up in person to pick up those stipends, they're actually accessing more resources. And that has allowed them to develop better connections with their case managers, and they're being able to actually have more follow through in what they're doing. So similar to what Judy said, like having that level of accountability, that's why we specifically designed it so that they have to show up in person, because that also allows us to be like, hey, let's check in. What are you missing? What do you need? How can we help? $150 goes a long way, maybe with like bus stipends, if somebody didn't have enough for food stamps, if someone really needed to put some gas into their car. But there are a lot of other pieces that when you're housing unstable, you also need to make sure are in place. And having that connection that like, hey, your check's ready, can you come in, check in and pick it up, has gone a long way for us. We did, similar to Judy, we did have one young adult who didn't get back to us on the survey on time. That is because the deadline for the report was a little off from the deadline that we had internally for them to give us the surveys back because we're doing it every quarter. But other than that, all of them have been engaged. We still have the full 28 young adults cohort, and they're doing great.
Great, thank you. So Angelica, I'd love to know, did you have any sort of unanticipated challenges or things that came up that you weren't necessarily expecting?
I will say two things that we weren't expecting with this program. We did have two young adults refuse it. And it was interesting to us because we were like, it's $150 for free. But there were some cultural differences, and they were like, no, if we're not working for it, we really don't want it. And it was like, well, I cannot tell you you have to work for it because it's yours as long as you're in the program. But they ended up backing out. They were new to the country. That was something that was interesting to me. Something else is that we did have some wonderful young adults who will have utilized this. They all are doing great with the stipends, and they're all using it for things that they really need. But we had young adults who we really wanted to help, but they will have aged out within the 18-month period. That was interesting for us as a team because we had some candidates who we really thought could really use it. Other than that, it's been going great.
And so, sorry, just to follow up, did you ultimately decide that the candidates who would age out in the 18th months weren't eligible, or did you decide to let them in?
So we decided not to because the program and all of the language says up until 25. So we didn't know how to really handle that. And we had other candidates available.
Understood. And I just have one last question. Has there been any challenges for the participants to come physically to the space every month?
No. So we actually had a young adult who was able to secure housing, and she moved a few towns over, I think Rockport. So what we did was that we agreed with her that she will do like monthly check-ins with her case manager virtually, and then we're mailing the check. So we're not making it a barrier for them to have to come in. So we'll work with them, but it's kind of like, we really want you to put in that little extra effort to come in and actually do things that are productive for you.
Makes total sense. Thank you, Angelica. Judy and Sophie, same question to you guys. Any unexpected challenges that you've experienced so far?
I wouldn't say challenges. I think one of the, I guess more of a learning, which we always talk about how we don't know what the tipping point is for students. Like, at what point are they're going to feel like they can't go to work? At what point are they going to feel like they can't pay their rent? For us, our awareness was really focused on at what point are they going to feel like they need to leave school? That's what it was in the past. And we knew that it could be needing a haircut for a job interview and not having that money, or it could be losing housing, or it could be in a food insecurity, or it could be I lost my ID. Like, you never know what the tipping point is, and if it's going to seem like something enormous or something small. And one of the things that I've noticed more with this is that it's the same situation, right? It's the same vulnerability of something that seems small to somebody who has housing security and who has food security. And so what I've noticed is that this, again, you don't get, I always say you don't get your whole salary. You could be earning $55,000 a year. It doesn't come that summer, right? It doesn't come when you take the job. And so you are really still barely making it, living paycheck to paycheck. And so I think for us, and again, I don't know if it's a challenge or if it will be a challenge for us as we become more aware of what those tipping points are during those first 18 months of employment that we maybe didn't know beforehand. And I think one of the things that we'll learn, hopefully through the survey, is what some of those challenges are going forward. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but that's something that's been on our minds.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And just sticking with the Wiley Network, I'm curious what you guys are interpreting as like signs of success. How are you feeling about the program and if it's going well and how you expected?
So I don't think we'll know until we get the surveys back. And I do, one of the things that we look at is just in general is what is the engagement. So one of the things that we think is sort of a normal, developmentally appropriate response is some students may not want anything to do with us after they graduate from college, right? They may want to be forging their own path and Delta's Labbing, and so one of the things that this sort of does is it forces them to stay connected, but we also want to be respectful of the fact that they may not want to be as like let them go live their lives. And so we invite them to come to all community activities. And so one of the things that we'll look at is to see, did anybody who's getting a graduate stipend, are they coming in increased numbers to those activities? Not everybody lives here, so they can't, it's not going to be some huge revelation, but just things that we will notice. And again, I think we'll have more after that 6-month survey.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to pose the same question to Angelica, and then I see that Bill popped a question in the chat asking about how you would amend or continue the program after the funding ends. So after Angelica answers the question about success, we'll go to Bill's question, and I open it up to any other questions from the audience as well.
I think that a lot of the success that we've seen is with the recurring engagement from young adults. Now they have this tie into the program and they have like a little bit of an extra incentive. So we offer a lot of supportive services, but they don't really have to engage with us if they don't want to. And when you think about somebody who's at crisis, like I'm thinking about where I'm sleeping tomorrow or how I'm going to get something to eat the day after that, they might not always be as open about engaging with you as much as they should, even though we could help with those situations they have going on. But money is actually a great incentive for them to actually make it true. And that's something that I'm excited to see how it pans out over the full course of the 18 months. I want to see how much of them we can actually keep on ongoingly and how that ongoing engagement will impact them longer term. So I'm very excited to see at the end of the period what that will look like for young adults. It's also, we offer continuously workshops, like financial workshops, one-on-one financial coaching. Them being part of this program, we've kind of encouraged them, and it's not something that they're mandated to do, but we've encouraged them to actually do those one-on-one coaching sessions. And they've gotten to understand and have a better handle on their finances, or like, how do I build my credit? How do I actually open a bank account? I'm doing all of those little pieces because they have actually a monetary incentive that's leading them towards that path. Do you want me to just jump in on Bill's question? So how will we amend or continue the program after the pilot ends? I think that this is very interesting for us here in the Essex County. So we partner with a lot of other organizations that serve in particular homeless youth, and they're actually looking forward to all of the results that we're going to have so that they can present it at the state levels as well, because this is going to show that actually you can trust a young adult with cash transfers. So I don't know if you all have heard a lot about that. I'm sure you have dealt with it as you were designing this project, but it's being a debate about whether or not a young adult should have direct cash transfers from a provider. And us being able to do this kind of work is going to demonstrate that, yes, you can trust a young adult to have the independence and the ability to decide what their needs are and how they're able to spend that money. And so far, all of them, like, yes, some of them might be lying to us, but all of them have been like, no, like, thanks to this, I was able to pay my rent. Or thanks to this, I was actually able to make it to this job interview because I needed an Uber. So things like that actually demonstrate the need and value of this kind of programs.
And just on that note, I have one follow-up question. Do you ask specifically what they spend the money on, or is it tracked in sort of a general way? Or I'm just curious about your approach to that.
So we have on our survey, we've asked them the questions, how did this help you? And that's how we've been able to collect the information. So we do our surveys quarterly. I'm not sure if that's the same model the Wily Network has, but every quarter when they come up to pick up that third check, we're like, hey, can you just fill out the survey for us? And because they're coming in person, they kind of like have to do the survey and give us the info. And they know that they don't have to prove to us in any way, shape, or form how they spend it, but we're asking them like, how did it help? And a lot of them will say transportation, a lot of them will say Uber. And we've asked them like just through the one-on-one case management, like how is it going? Do you see this actually working out for you? And that's when they give us all of that good feedback.
Yeah, that makes sense. Judy and Sophie, curious to hear what you guys think about once the pilot ends and what you might do with that data or try and continue or edit the program.
So I do see this, I do see the first 18, most of our students go on to jobs, a few go to graduate school. So the first year to 18 months is, I would say, the more precarious 18 months. The students that we work with are not being discussed at the state level. They're not being discussed, you know, they were invisible on campus. They're seen as sort of the success stories, but they still don't have the infrastructure, right? They're still really on their own. And so that next 18 months is equally as tricky, maybe even more tricky, because they don't have a dorm room. And they don't technically have us, although they can always call us. We're always here. But so what we're really looking at is that amount of money the right amount of money, and can we, after this pilot is done, can we budget for that? And what we realize is as we grow, so we tried to increase our in-school stipend. We give $150 a month, right? We tried to increase that to $200 this year, which is approaching our 10-year mark. That's inflation, right? So we're not really giving them any more money. And we ended up having to take it out of the budget, very sadly. We're doing something else. We're trying to be a little creative. So we're giving them a bonus bump in stipend around the holidays and in June before the summer. But recognizing that we are really going to need to prepare, we're going to need to be talking to funders in advance. We're going to have to see if we can sort of endow a postgraduate stipend so that we're not diluting anything that we do during college. And so that's the dilemma for us. I haven't seen the surveys come in yet, but my guess is that it's a huge help just from the students that I've talked to. And so it is something that we would certainly like to really make a permanent part of our program if we can manage it from a budgetary standpoint.
That makes sense. I'd like to open it up. If anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself.
I just have a quick question. In both programs, what percentage of applicants were able to participate? So what percentage of the applicants did these funds cover in terms of showing what kind of extended need or desire there might want to be for that kind of program?
I would say that the Haven Project usually holds a caseload of about 100 young adults. So we're talking about 30% of a cohort that we had at the time we were piloting this project. And we were starting the project, we have about 100 young adults that could have utilized the funds. And then as case managers, my team really had to go in and dig in who is the most in need and who can this impact the most, and kind of make those tough choices.
Angelica, how are the people who didn't get selected? Do they even know about it?
Some of them do, not all of them do, but we didn't publicize the project to all young adults. I don't want to make you feel like we think you deserve this any less than anybody else. So we took a cohort, we invited them all together. We did like workshops leading up to the start of the project where we explained to them the implications about taxes. We had them file out their W-9s. We kind of led them through all of those pieces because some of them have never dealt with that kind of paperwork. And then that process was very specific to the cohort. some of them, as I mentioned, some of them decided not to actually participate in the full project. But we didn't like tell every single one of our young adults that this was available, because then we will have had to tell them they didn't make the cut. And it's tough when you think, oh, well, they can't give me $150 if they're choosing not to. They might not quite understand that there are limited spots or that we don't have all the funding available. So those were internal choices that my team had to make.
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, okay. On the Wily network, I just got a little confused. You're providing this funding to support to graduates, but you spoke about the tipping point, and that's for a different population. That's for the student the people who are still in school. I was just a little confused as to
So I was
what you
saying
were.
that we are well aware of what the tipping points are while they're in college. And we are becoming more aware through this project of what the tipping points are for the graduates.
Okay.
Right? We didn't have that insight. We didn't have that opportunity to be connecting in that way to see where their pain points were of making ends meet post college. And so
Got it.
that's, I think, a big learning for us right now.
And Judy, too, I'd love to hear the question about what percentage of your cohort were you able to provide the stipend to?
So I don't know what the percentage is, but 15 students graduated and 14 students are using it. So, and the only person who's not using it is not eligible. So that's why they're not using it. So we can offer it to everybody. It makes it a little easier. We don't have to have any kind of process.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions? Heidi?
I'd love to hear more from Angelica maybe, but Judy as well. Like when you told people, I guess in Judy's program, they're already used to getting 150, and I'm sure they were thrilled to hear about this, but I'm curious kind of what people's reactions were when you told them. Like Angelica, you mentioned one person, like I just, if they had no exposure to this, to suddenly say we're going to give you 150 a year for a month for 18 months. I'm just curious how that went.
A lot of them couldn't believe it. They were like, what do I have to do? What do I have to do for work? How do I get the money? And I'm like, you don't have to do anything. We just want you to take care of yourself and help yourself with this money. And here and there, we'll ask you for some data just to make sure that the program's working. And they had a lot of questions. So we did different like sessions depending on their ability, where my team and the young adults, like each cohort, I think we had like 3 different sessions. And each time we will have like 8 young adults. They will ask like, but why are you guys giving us this money? How is this working? It's like, oh, here's free money. Some of them just couldn't wrap their hands around it. And that's part of the fact of that the young lady, the young man who refused to take it, they were like, you giving me money if I'm not working for it doesn't make sense to me. I think we really tried with them explaining it in a multitude of ways, but culturally they were like, if I'm not working for it, I don't want it. So you need to give me work. But then that goes against what the whole program is. Like it's for you to take and utilize. And they have been very grateful. Every month they come in person. They have a chat with their case managers. They come to drop in, they grab their checks, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to use this for X, Y, or Z. Or I've been really looking forward to doing X and Z, and I'm going to be able to do it with this. So it's really been a much different process because for them, like, they've never had somebody who just be like, here, this is to help you. A lot of them have not had any form of support since an early age, because some of them come to us when they're 17, they're 18, 19, and they are aging out of the CF care. They've been kicked out by their parents, and they're like, why are you helping me? So it's a much different process. Yeah.
I think for us, the surprise is is more of a psychological support in addition to the money that, oh, they've been part of so many programs in their lives that just end and they don't hear from people again. And while we do send birthday cards and we send holiday, we're in touch with them. But this is, I think, a a psychological commitment that is unexpected, and I think could be a corrective experience for young people who have had to transition through so many people that they really thought they could trust, but then they aged out or the program closed. We have one student who actually is not part of this program, but for the first 5 years, he was here for the first, maybe the second year to the 6th year, he would monthly come in and say, are you still good? Are you still solvent? Are you still going to be here? Because he had been part of so many programs that closed. And I think the psychological safety of this is really huge for people who have had to go through really an imbalanced sense of security for their whole lives. In addition to the money, I think it's but still a very important piece of this that could go unrecognized.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Phil, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I was just, going back to my early days in the grant making world where, then operating support wasn't done very much. And most grants were pretty restricted and most were very ambitious, kind of in the nature of this sort of grant, where whatever you did, you wanted a big payoff, you wanted leverage, and you wanted to be able to point to that leverage. And so, yeah, I gave 50,000, but look, it ended up with $1 million of benefit or something like, and that would be a great grant. Well, it strikes me in this case, the free money bit can be seen by many people as just a nice thing that makes life somewhat smoother, but doesn't carry that kind of leverage. And I know there are experts out there like Matt Aronson at Bay Cash who have big evaluation behind them and are tracking this very question. But, if you were our communications team, are we in a place where we know that this is more than just a nice thing? Sounds to me as if it, particularly Angelica, you are mentioning some leverage there. But for this cash, people would not be getting other benefits and they wouldn't be maintaining relationships. But and Sean, I mean, you could jump in on this with the summer fund because you probably have some experience of the cousin to direct cash, which is paying young people to participate in nonprofit programs, giving them a salary of some sort. I mean, does this really transform lives or not? Can we go out and sell this grant to actually, institutionalize this kind of thing, or should we?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll speak to the work that we've done in sort of the youth enrichment space. I think it can be, you're speaking of this challenge of like, how do we tell the story, and how are we like sort of identifying what we know to be true from experience to, from our conversations with folks that are, end users of these dollars into, sort of the philanthropic space to make the sell more broadly. I think as we are a donor that does sort of general operating giving, we do work with young people that is about, self-sufficiency, sustainability, financial literacy, things like that. The measurables are really challenging in a fragmented space where this is being done across, hundreds of programs. Sort of measuring the inertia of that is really, really hard. And I think you asked me a question. It's one that I ruminate over on a daily basis and agonize over, pretty much all the time of like, how do we tell the story of what we know to be true, from lived experience, and from feedback from our partners. It's kind of an interesting conversation for me in that sense. It's just kind of learning how to think through that as both sort of a user of philanthropic dollars. We do fundraising ourselves, but also as a donor ourselves. So
I would say
I don't have the answer to your question.
Yeah. You could ask the federal government this question about all that direct cash that came out of the COVID experience. which people really benefited from. But you don't hear a lot of people, and I don't see government studies saying, oh, this was the greatest thing and look what it did for people. What you hear instead is a kind of a sourness. Oh, I used to get this money and I don't. Or this was a big driver of the inflation we're all suffering from. So kind of a non-story. I would hope with this kind of program, which is much smaller and more benign and nicer, that we will get really persuasive stories. And Rachel and Heidi, I'm sure you're up on the research better than I am. But
Thanks, Phil. I do see your hand up, Susan. I just want to give Angelica and Judy a chance to weigh in first if they have anything to add. And if not, that's okay too. We can go to Susan Berry.
I will just say that I think that at the end of the 18 months, we might be able to get some testimonials from the young adults who actually went to the program, and the voices of the people who are actually being served and utilized and being impacted by this program is what can drive you to make a case about why this is needed. And this is definitely something that's been very debated. I don't know if you guys know, but the city of Salem recently did a guaranteed income program for households that were low income. So I'm interested to see, because there's definitely a lot of conversation regarding the topic. Being able to do this kind of pilots, we'll see what the data says at the end of the 18 months.
Yeah, and before I hand it over to Judy, I would just add the City of Cambridge partnered with Rise Up. They're doing a really big program as well, and they're actually doing a webinar next week with their research evaluation partner. So if anyone's interested, I'm happy to share any information on that as well. Judy or Sophie, did you have anything to add? If not, we can go to Susan Berry.
The only thing I would like to add is I really appreciate the way, Sean, you were phrasing this about, and Phil, is about, how do we tell the story? As a social service agency, we're often asked to show proof of concept in some really murky waters. And we don't want to deny services to anybody as long as we have the opportunity. And I think these things, just like we're talking about psychological safety, being able to pay that last bill, being able to go to urgent care, like those kinds of things are truly make or break moments for young people. And so I think the phrasing of that, how do you tell the story, rather than how do you communicate this in a quantitative way, which can reduce young people who are just trying to live their lives to a number or a statistic that, while I understand when you're talking about a large scale thing, we need those kinds of statistics. But when we're working one-on-one from a social service perspective, it feels very supportive for you to use that kind of language, which actually is much more descriptive of the way we work with young people, which is really each person's individual life and their individual needs. So I just wanted to say thank you for that question. While I respect numbers, I also I want to elevate the ability to use storytelling as evidence.
just getting back to what, Sean, that whole business of paying youth participants just who are participating in an after-school program. I don't remember funders driving that. Now, I may be wrong, but it seemed to me that it came from the ground, and all these service providers just began to recognize that kids needed money, and they did it. And so it was a kind of an organic thing, unlike this project.
Yeah, I mean, as a groundswell, it's a recognition that there's an equity issue, that there is a replacement effect to everything that young people are doing. There is an opportunity cost to every experience that a young person undertakes, right? And that opportunity cost is often there's not sufficient privilege to be able to take up those programs, be them something that we're sort of participating in as a participant or as an employee. It is ultimately a privilege to be able to take that on, whether you're on the grounds of opportunity cost of time. And I think a lot of programs recognize that as a threat to their sustainability. But I think more importantly, a threat to the model of how can we build trust with young people? How can we be mindful of the fact that there are there are really important needs in the household to be income earners, to provide for siblings. So you're right. I mean, it was in many ways a groundswell, and it was one that was pretty difficult to adopt in the donor space, having tried to get some donors to adopt it. Present company notwithstanding, but all to say, it's a challenging thing to tell that story. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're talking about, is storytelling. And yeah, no, I appreciate the question, Phil.
Great, thank you. Susan Berry, over to you.
Yeah, I had to write down what I wanted to say because I forgot along the way, but it's more of an observation. First, I want to go back to the beginning and really think about the funders, all of you that were, and some that couldn't be here, that were sitting around the table when we were making the decision about choosing the organizations, and how prescient it was for you to make the decision. You wanted to choose two organizations that were kind of unlike each other, and how that really provides such an interesting contrast just in this conversation with Wiley. Sort of their approach is, okay, we're kind of setting you off and we're going to see how this stipend, this direct income works. And Haven saying, we're going to hold you close and see how this works. And I think it's just wonderful. And then finally, I'll just say, and this is not in, sort of pushing back at Phil, but I think this kind of project, at least at this small scale, might not be well suited to funders who are looking for an immediate quantitative benefit, but more for what can we learn from this? And also, even today, I started to think about, what does it look like when we measure success? And what does success look like? Years ago, I worked in the domestic violence field, and everyone said success is when a woman leaves a abusive household. And we said, sometimes it's just taking a first step to going for counseling or doing this or doing that. And the new thing I heard today, and I'm embarrassed that it felt new to me, but this psychological safety, this interdependence, this you're still here, I'm still going to get this money when the world is, cracking or falling apart around them. Not everyone, but to know that in a world that's not been safe, that there's some security, it's just really, really hits me hard. So I just want to say thank you to the funders who were so, you might not have known it at the time, but I think the contrast is just so interesting, and I appreciate that. Thank you for giving me the time to get on a pulpit. But thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Okay, do any of the audience members have any other questions, comments?
I just have a quick one. I mean, a lot of this, if I think about my own kids, the inflection points where they came to me for help. And, I understand fully that these are big inflection points for the kids coming out of Wiley. And, that it sounds like every day is an inflection point for the kids in Haven. And just having sort of that backbone support. But I also know that it wasn't an 18-month period in time for my kids. 18 months might have launched them for 3 to 5 years, and then something else derailed them and got back. So when I think as a funder about the legs or the longitudinality of something like this, I just can't imagine that an 18-month period is ever going to launch a kid and never have them encounter another moment in time when they need this kind of support. So for me as a funder, this is definitely a tool, but how does it fit in and where does it come from to follow a kid throughout their life, or an adult, a young adult throughout their life? So that's my comment.
No, I do think go ahead, Angelica.
Well, I was just going to say, so when you're thinking of it, you're thinking about it ending at the end of the 18-month period, but it's the impact that those 18 months can have in that young adult. So for us in particular, we're talking about them continuously doing case management. What is case management for us at the Haven Project? It's giving you the tools and resources to establish yourself long term. We're going to teach you how to do your taxes. We're going to teach you how to interact. We're going to teach you how to hold a job and actually sustain it. We're going to teach you how to talk to your landlord. And those 18 months will allow us to actually engage us, give you those skills. At the end of 18 months, you might not want to engage with us anymore. You might not be receiving the money, but what we taught you, it's going to follow you through. It's going to give you opportunities that otherwise you wouldn't have gotten. So although 18 months, yes, it's not going to be something that's going to solve all of their issues, and it's not also not a lot of money, but it still has an impact that maybe without those 18 months and that monetary support they wouldn't have been able to get otherwise.
I would also like to add to that, that when we meet Wiley scholars, when they've arrived at college, they often have not had a safe and consistent and stable adult presence in their lives, right? They haven't had those people. And so it takes some time for them to learn how to build trust, how to ask for help, and where to go, how to utilize community resources. And so it may not be the specific lessons, right? It's how we're going to help them to develop the skills and how to access the help they need, right? So yes, absolutely, you are right. That 18 months is just a blip on the scale of the next phase of needing to get the next job, or breaking up with that relationship that you thought was going to be forever, or a family member who has been in and out of your life and is now leaning on you in some way. All of those things are not things that we can anticipate. And unpredictability has been the core part of a core aspect of their lives the whole time. So if during the 4 years that we know a student and continue 18 months is to show them that there are people out there that you can trust. There are places you can go out and ask for help. You can have a different relationship with a parent that is not parental. It can become familial, right? They're more like a cousin. You can enjoy them, but you're not going to lean on them the same way. But how do you identify those people in your life that you can lean on in that way, that are not just people that are from Wiley, but that are in the broader community, so that when then you do hit that next obstacle, that you know that there are people, you have the hope that you can find the right people to help you through it. And I think that's the difference, because it hasn't been for them the same person since they were born.
So what you're all saying brings to mind some little editorial I must have read this morning about social interaction now being a status symbol, or people with money do better with the human relationships because they can afford it. Whereas other people, like my barber, I was just there yesterday, a young guy, boxer, but he's a barber too. Anyway, he was on the phone the whole time while he was cutting my hair, and the message kept saying, "Your call is very important to us." He'd been on for 2 hours. And so maybe what you're saying is that this human side of the of this project is really the key thing, and that money's just the currency, but it's that human connection that is probably going to be the most lasting thing.
Or both.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we have just under 10 minutes left. I have one last question I'd love to ask you both, but also, again, feel free to put anything in the chat or let us know if you guys have any other questions. But given that most of our funders are coming back for the next round, which will kick off in 2025, and we are again doing a guaranteed income focus for young adults, this time focusing on young adults who are participating in workforce development programs, I think we'd all be curious to hear from you any advice you have when it comes time to select the nonprofit organizations for the next round. Is there any indicator that someone's ready to start, or anything you can share with us? We'll start with you, Angelica.
I think that when I'm thinking about doing this, most of the social services agencies that are established in the communities already have ways of dealing with their particular population. But the most key pieces to this kind of project is being able to do the payroll for them, having a way that you can actually handle that. I know some agencies might not have the ability to do that, but it's also like we've been talking, as Phil was saying, like the results are always something that we're looking forward to. Having the ability to do that follow through and be able to get them information or just get the feedback. And for us in particular, is also having the ability to be able to offer the extra support to do things that are not necessarily money related. That social interactions, that learning resources, that learning those skills. I think those are the key components for this kind of project.
Thank you. Judy, Sophie?
Aside from the infrastructure piece, I'm not sure I have anything to add, although I think what I was grateful for is this made us stretch our thinking. And it hadn't been something, because we want to be very careful not to interfere with what we're doing during the college period. Yet we were keenly aware that the next period was tricky too. And so this helped us stretch in a way that did not involve mission creep. And when we thought about doing it, we anticipate, and maybe this is it, and to articulate how you think you could continue it. If you feel like it's valuable at the end, articulate in advance how you think you might be able to continue it going forward prior to getting involved. I mean, we have the luxury of no one's really going to know if we stop, right? Because people are graduating, but eventually people might know. And so I was glad that I had thought about that, our ability to incorporate it. And again, we have no idea what's going to happen. We're all dependent on funding every minute. So, but presuming things continue to go like it is, like they have for us, it's something that we would want to continue to incorporate. And so I think those are the two things. Like, if you want to keep it, start to figure out how you're going to do it. And the fact that it was a stretch, I think, in terms of our own thinking, was a benefit to Wily, a sort of an additional benefit to Wily.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, last call. Anyone have anything else to add? Okay, well, again, I want to thank everyone for your time today. I really appreciate you showing up, to both the funders and our partners. And for the funders who are participating in the next round, you will be certainly hearing from me as we get ready to kick off. We'll be starting in January, and we are excited to partner with you again in this upcoming round. And with that, we can we can call it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. It was great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.